Hello, and welcome to today's discussion on bank M&A and core banking modernization. My name is Alex Johnson. I am the creator of FinTech Takes, and I am thrilled to be joined by Nicole Pienkos, SVP and Head of Regional Banking at FIS. Nicole, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex. Excited to be here.
I am excited for you to be here too. This is going to be a great conversation. We're going to get, I think, pretty nerdy on some topics that I personally am very interested in and I know you're very passionate about. But before we do that, would you mind giving folks just a little bit of context on your background in the industry and your current role at FIS?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me again. From a background perspective, I have 20 plus years in fintech, predominantly with FIS. So I have the unique role of starting my experience in the fintech industry in finance. So this topic is a passion of mine from an M&A, from a merger and acquisition experience, both on the finance side, from the buying, selling, integrating, but then certainly in my role of the last 4 years, leading regional banking and getting to partner with our clients as they are acquiring institutions and bringing them on the regional banking platform.
Fantastic. Well, your experience is a perfect fit for the conversation that we want to have today because we want to talk about bank M&A and sort of what's happening, particularly in the regional and community bank space, which you know very well and you spend a lot of your time in, and then also kind of what its impact is on core banking consolidation and modernization, right? I mean, I think, often think about core banking as a very difficult sort of problem to work around. It's not always an easy sort of knot to untangle. But as we're going to talk about, the modernization process can actually be part and parcel of sort of an M&A process and sort of an excuse to get that work done and to really dive into that. So I want to talk all about how that works and what your experience has been. But before we get into that, I would like to specifically start by talking about bank M&A, right? So I think there's a sense that particularly over the next 4 years, we're likely to see kind of an uptick in M&A activity. But you know this market much better than I. Obviously, your clients are the ones who are sort of in the trenches getting this work done. Can you sort of characterize for us the current state of bank M&A in this regional and community segment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I would say the market is hot right now from an M&A perspective. And we've seen trends over the last, few years, going back several years, and then it cooled off a little bit. But I think from an environment perspective, the regulatory environment is very favorable for continued M&A, and we certainly have experienced that as a fintech provider, even in the course of the last several months in 2025.
So your expectation would be that for the foreseeable future, we're likely to get kind of an uptick in M&A activity. Is that a fair assumption?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's been consolidation in the community and regional banking space for a number of years, and we think the market's very favorable to continue some of that consolidation. Again, regulatory environment's favorable for M&A.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, and I think that it kind of reminds me actually of on the fintech side, sort of the process of going public after you're private. Like there are these windows of time where you sort of have to seize the moment when it happens, and I completely agree with you that. From a bank M&A perspective, there's a window coming up where we are going to see a real increase in this activity. I want to ask you about the challenges that go into that, right? And I will just admit my own lack of knowledge here. I've never been through a bank M&A process myself. I've seen a few of them up close. You've seen a lot more over 20 years. I'm curious if you can sort of help us understand why they tend to be challenging, what some of the most common challenges are. And, we can talk about strategic challenges, operational challenges, people and culture challenges, like wherever you want to take this question. But I'm curious for your lens on what are some of the common challenges that go into bank M&A?
Sure. I mean, from a merger acquisition perspective, it's a strategic decision. In today's environment, banks are looking for efficiencies, growth, new product, and modernization comes into that. So, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But from a strategic perspective, you're looking for a cultural fit, an opportunity for growth. It might be expanding a geographic footprint for the institution, but overall, what the institutions are looking for is how do they accelerate their growth And it comes with, challenges, as you had mentioned, sometimes cultural challenges. It's really important to have the right cultural fit as institutions come together, and then also the right operating model as the combination comes together, making sure you have the right operating model and the right technology stack, as well as the right technology partner from a success perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking of technology, obviously the focus of our conversation is on core banking. I mean, this is very trite to say, so I apologize, but core banking conversions and upgrades are really hard, right? And I think one of the things I'm curious to kind of double click into is specifically for the segment that you focus on, right? These regional and community banks. I'm curious if you can kind of take us inside the thinking and the process of what goes into core banking upgrades, conversions, modernization. Like, what does that work tend to look like? And why is it in a lot of cases very challenging?
Yeah, I think of core as kind of the heart and lungs, if you will, of the technology stack. And so that's what makes it challenging. You want to emerge from an acquisition a stronger institution with a superior customer experience. So it's really, really important as you're working through different components of the conversion, that you don't disrupt your client base. And your clients really want to see you emerge with a stronger solution set and superior client experience than when you were just, one institution versus the combination. So there's a lot of work that goes into any conversion. I'm really, really pleased from an FIS perspective. I think we offer a best-in-class service. And that goes all the way back to understanding what the goals are of the combined institution, how they think about their operating model. In fact, we provide services very specific. We call it the target operating model, where we'll talk about what's the end state, what's the business process, what are the employee roles, because fundamentally organizational health and strong employee alignment is key to success of any conversion. And there's all kinds of detailed, obviously, work that goes into a conversion. But I think from a success standpoint, those are some key areas of focus.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And it kind of bringing our two topics together a little bit, as we've been hinting at, there is this opportunity, I think, afforded by mergers and acquisitions to tackle a core modernization or a core conversion process. I'm curious if you can sort of articulate for us why that is such an opportunity at that moment in time, and how you've seen that work in the past with institutions that have taken that moment as an opportunity to sort of tackle this big challenge of core modernization.
Yeah, I would say anytime you're looking at M&A, there's an end state in terms of, realizing synergies. And again, we talked a little bit about the client and cultural experience, but your technology stack is very important in attaining those goals. So it's a perfect opportunity for institutions to take a look at their legacy platform that they might be on. And what's interesting, what we've certainly seen in the market is the incumbent, even in the acquiring institution from a technology perspective, isn't always the best solution for the combined organization. So banks are looking for platforms that scale, that have a tremendous opportunity for additional growth. Typically, when an institution does an acquisition, that's usually not the one and only. They're typically more acquisitive institutions, and they want to continue to grow on the platform. They want providers that bring that innovation, modern technology stack. And I know we're going to probably speak in a little bit about open banking, but allowing them from a best of breed perspective to bring products and services together to their clients.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really well said. The thing that stuck out to me there that I'd like to double click on for a moment, if you don't mind, is this idea that when there's a merger and acquisition, there does need to be a bit of a sort of level setting on, okay, what's the best approach moving forward? What are some best practices that you have seen in terms of evaluating how to bring those tech stacks together, and when to use one versus another, and where to sort of identify gaps? Can you sort of talk us through in a little more detail, like what are some of the best practices for approaching that part of the merger and acquisition process?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's really around solution definition. So let me back up for a second and say
Sure.
when banks are evaluating their technology stack, they're really evaluating the full ecosystem. So it's not just a core buying decision. No one goes to market and buys, deposit loans portfolio of solutions. They're really looking for how is this integrated? And in particular in the regional space and even community space, there's expectations of a very high level of integration. So that's a piece of it. Can they integrate other solutions from other tech stacks into the platform? I would say in today's market, that's very much table stakes. In addition to that, as they're looking at gaps of feature function, it's really important to understand what the end goal and what the solution desire is for the end state customer. So really looking through feature functionality, integration capability, how does that work with other products and services that they want? But really the design is around how it impacts the end consumer and what products that institution wants to bring to market. So there isn't a one size fits all, but certainly it's a partnership with the tech provider to make sure that we can have the right solution, either from an integration perspective or within that tech stack directly.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And you're sort of taking us right to where I wanted to go, which is I did want to talk a little bit, as you mentioned before, about open banking and about kind of more of an ecosystem approach to banking. And really, this is all sort of part and parcel of this question, which is, what is the gold at the end of the rainbow, right? Like, what is the thing that we are pursuing by trying to take a more modernized approach to core banking? So I guess I'm curious if you could maybe start broadly by sort of articulating for the banks that you work with, when they do kind of want to take this leap forward, what is it that they're trying to achieve strategically in terms of modernizing their core? Like what outcome are they hoping for?
Yeah, I think it's bringing modern, innovative products and solutions to their end customers. And that could be in a couple different ways. I think it's also driving efficiency as they look at it. So does their technology provider can provide, are they doing anything in the generative AI space, as an example, to increase efficiency? Are there opportunities for business process improvement, redefining kind of roles and responsibilities within the bank from a best of breed? So that gets a little out of technology. However, how we approach it from an FIS and regional banking perspective is we have consulting services, business process improvements, solutions as well. So we bring the technology and that consulting lens to provide a really good end client experience. From a modernization perspective, I think there's a lot that goes into, the cost of technology, is the solution in the cloud? How are we looking at those modernized components? So there's a lot that goes into that decisioning, but from a modernization perspective, folks want to make sure that they're on the latest and greatest technology, but also making sure that they can still serve their end clients, and stability and support and service are a key component of that evaluation as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, I want to specifically ask about this, I think, focus that FIS has in terms of working with your clients, which is sort of creating these more open ecosystem type environments from a technology perspective. And, you referenced open banking earlier. I mean, it seems to me like one of the macro trends that's happening in banking, and you see this on the fintech side, you see this with sort of the competition, you see this with regulation around open banking, but there is this idea that like banking is just becoming more open and more interoperable and more driven by APIs and integrations and partnerships. Core banking obviously sits at the very center of that. And so I'm curious if you can kind of articulate from your perspective, what is sort of a more open ecosystem? What does it look like? And what's its value as a part of this?
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, I mean, it's really table stakes, right? So financial institutions want to make sure that they can have a fully integrated solution, but they don't want to be limited necessarily to one fintech provider. And so I think that open ecosystem is so important. From a regional banking perspective, we have APIs, both process system, et cetera, that our institutions can use to lever either other fintechs or other ways they want to bring products and services to their end client and integrate it through that, what we call the Code Connect platform from an FIS perspective. I would say in addition to that, there's been kind of this evolution, if you will, where from a consumer data perspective, there's a couple of ways to think of it. One, financial institutions need, from an open access perspective, need to give consumers the data that they hold on behalf of them. But then, it's really, really important, and the consumer expects that those institutions are maintaining privacy. And as we all know, banking is a relationship-oriented business. And so it's really important that they maintain that, primary consumer relationship as well, where you've got aggregators and third parties out there that want access to the financial data, but they don't want the burden of, a banking license, if you will, or charter, or quite frankly, the responsibility of servicing bank accounts.
Absolutely.
And then you've got kind of the third leg of the stool, which is the consumers, right? They want to leverage their data to unlock third-party applications opportunities. And then you've got to manage the, consent management component of that. So it's really interesting how this is evolving. Obviously, 1033 would brought that in right squarely into effect and has been, right? So we'll see what happens with that. But there's a lot going on in the financial institution and banking, not only from a technology perspective, but also, from a data perspective and the aggregator. So it's really important that your technology partner is able to provide that functionality for you to ingest as a financial institution, and then obviously benefiting the end consumer.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, just to add my 2 cents on that real quick. I mean, there's two ways to look at a lot of these changes that are happening in the ecosystem, right? One is like, this is a threat, this is a burden, this is something that I'm being forced to do. But I think a much better and more productive way to look at it is, as you've been talking about, this is an opportunity, right? In the same way that like M&A can be a burden and a challenge and a struggle, it can also be an opportunity to modernize your approach to technology. I think the shift to a more open ecosystem is the same way, where depending on how you look at it, it can be, a significant challenge and a burden, or it can be an opportunity. And the opportunity is exactly what you described, which is you can bring better products to your customers, right? You can bring better experiences to them by, embracing a more open approach. And obviously, core technology, APIs, the ability to be able to plug in, third-party service providers, all of those are critical components. I'm curious, Nicole, if you can maybe talk a little bit about an example, and you don't need to, mention any names, but just sort of in the abstract, an example of, maybe a bank that you've seen do well in this area. Because I think sometimes we get a little wrapped around the axle on like, hey, theoretically, this makes a lot of sense. But as you and I both, I think, really well know, no bank very reasonably wants to go first, right? They sort of want to know that like this is a model that has worked and has been proven successful for others. Can you give us a little color commentary on, examples you've seen of this approach working well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to give you kind of two kind of recent examples. One, won't name institutions, of course, but had a $50+ billion bank from an asset perspective, very retail, commercial focused. And wanting to get into a different market. And so they purchased a very slightly smaller, but very private wealth focused institution. So you can imagine there's a lot of cultural differences between the institutions. Both banks operated on a totally different banking technology stacks, ecosystems. And they really turned to FIS to what was the best path for the combined bank. I spoke a little bit about target operating model work. When institutions come together, or even when they're thinking of planning an acquisition at any time, that work can be done. That really helps design the end state, both operationally and technology-wise, for best-of-breed product solutions, and also backing into the timeline. There's we talked a little bit about culture and the importance of the employees as well. So making sure that employees are properly trained, the solutions are properly tested. There's a lot of risk that goes into an M&A when a bank comes to market, and especially on making sure that the end consumer experience is a superior one. So in this case, we were able to implement almost over, I think it was 50 applications, 320 interfaces. So we talk a little bit about the experience from an open banking perspective, just looking at the interfaces, not only within one tech stack, but then how we interface products that might be outside of a tech stack. And that was a very, very successful acquisition that we were able to help those banks come together. So very, very exciting. The other example is a little bit different, but of equal interest. Two large banks, merged. The bank really wanted a solution partner. So I talked a little bit about the banking being really a relationship-oriented business. And I think that model needs to extend to the fintech partner. So really important that partnership is strong. So the bank looked for a partner that could, one, converge and merge. Banks had a lot of experience, but could do it in a very compressed timeline so they could get to market faster. So we were able to provide services. The scalability of the platform was very attractive from a regional banking perspective, and best-in-class conversion practices. This bank wanted to move extremely fast. So we were able to complete a target operating model in less than 90 days in this example, trained over 1,200 new employees on the new regional banking platform. And just to give you a sense of size and scale, the combined institution had over 2 million customers. So it was an awesome project for us, and really highlighted how FIS can bring services, and the regional banking team can operate either in a very fast mode or certainly can make sure that the banks have had success as they combine and work through all the risks and opportunities that we've talked about throughout this time together today.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Let's wrap up with one last question, and we'll make this kind of a little bit more tactical, which is advice. So imagine that you're talking to a regional or community bank executive who is going down this path, right? We're going to make an acquisition. We're going to be combining together with another institution. We are sort of thinking about this as an opportunity to try to figure out some things we've wanted to figure out for a while from a technology perspective, and kind of rationalizing things down and modernizing it. What's the one piece of advice you would give in terms of where to start that process, in terms of how they're thinking about it, and how to start approaching that?
Yeah, I think the first thing is one, financial goals, right? Making sure that you understand clearly your financial goals well before the acquisition, quite frankly, is executed. But then also operational goals. What are the operational goals that you're looking at? Culture is so important. I can't emphasize that enough. I've seen in throughout my career where there just isn't cultural fits, and those unfortunately those deals unravel over time, either prematurely or even when the purchase goes through. They're just very, very difficult to operate as two organizations. So that cultural fit is important. And then end state customer. I think what do you want the customer experience to be at the end of the conversion, the merger, the acquisition, whatever the case may be? Because from a client perspective, that's your growth target. That's your geographical footprint that you're evaluating. And you really want to make sure that you have a successful acquisition that meets all those financial goals, employee goals, client goals. So I would start with that very simple template, and then you can get into all kinds of much more detailed work that would follow. But that's where I would start and focus.
Fantastic. I think that is wonderful advice, and that is a wonderful place to leave it. Nicole, thank you so much for taking out the time. This was great. I really enjoyed this discussion.
Thank you very much, Alex. I appreciate you having me.